Welcome to Lifelong Echoes, where we explore the remarkable stories of people who changed our world forever. Today, we soar into the extraordinary life of Amelia Earhart, a woman who conquered the skies when flying was considered far too dangerous for women, and whose mysterious disappearance over the Pacific Ocean remains one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles. This is the story of a fearless pioneer who proved that the sky was not the limit, but just the beginning. On July 24th, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas, a baby girl was born who would one day soar higher than the clouds themselves. Her name was Amelia Mary Earhart, and from her very first breath, she seemed destined for adventure. Amelia was not like other girls of her time. While her friends played with dolls and learned to be proper young ladies, Amelia climbed trees, collected bugs, and built things with her hands. She kept a scrapbook of newspaper articles about successful women, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and business owners, at a time when most people believed women should only be wives and mothers. Amelia's childhood was marked by both adventure and instability. Her father, Edwin Earhart, was a talented lawyer who struggled with alcoholism. The family moved frequently as Edwin lost jobs and searched for new opportunities. Sometimes they lived in comfortable homes. Other times they had barely enough money for food. Despite their financial struggles, Amelia's mother, Amy, encouraged her daughters to be independent and strong. She bought Amelia and her sister Muriel matching red bloomers, a scandalous type of pants that allowed girls to run and play freely. Most girls in 1900 wore long, heavy skirts that made physical activity nearly impossible. When Amelia was 7 years old, she built a roller coaster in her backyard using wooden boards and the roof of a tool shed. She climbed to the top and rode her homemade coaster down, crashing spectacularly at the bottom. When her mother found her covered in dirt and bruises, Amelia's eyes were shining with excitement. "It felt just like flying," she declared. That moment planted a seed in Amelia's imagination. Even though airplanes had barely been invented, she began dreaming of soaring through the sky like the birds she watched from her bedroom window. As a young woman, Amelia worked various jobs: teacher, social worker, photographer, but nothing satisfied her restless spirit. Then, in 1920, at a California air show, her life changed forever. Amelia's father took her to see the aerial demonstrations, hoping to cheer her up after a difficult period in her life. As they watched the pilots perform loops, dives, and barrel rolls high above the crowd, one pilot flew low over the spectators. Amelia later wrote, "I did not understand it at the time, but I believe that little red airplane said something to me as it swished by. That something was a calling." Within days, Amelia had arranged to take her first airplane ride with pilot Frank Hawks. The moment the plane left the ground, Amelia knew she had found her destiny. "As soon as I left the ground, I knew I myself had to fly," she wrote in her diary. But learning to fly was expensive, and Amelia was not wealthy. She worked multiple jobs: truck driver, photographer, stenographer, saving every penny for flying lessons. She cut her hair short and slept in her leather jacket to make it look worn and experienced, trying to fit in with the tough, masculine world of aviation. Amelia's first flight instructor was Nita Snook, one of the few female pilots in the world. Nita was amazed by Amelia's natural ability and fearless attitude. Within 6 months, Amelia had saved enough money to buy her own airplane, a bright yellow biplane she lovingly named the Canary. On October 22, 1922, Amelia set her first aviation record, flying the Canary to an altitude of 14,000 feet, higher than any woman had flown before. She was only 25 years old, but she was already making history. In 1928, an opportunity came that would make Amelia famous worldwide. The year before, Charles Lindbergh had become an international hero by flying solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, a wealthy publisher named George Putnam wanted to sponsor the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Putnam chose Amelia for this historic flight, but there was a catch. She would be only a passenger. Two male pilots, Wilmer Stultz and Lewis Gordon, would actually fly the plane while Amelia sat in the back, like a sack of potatoes, as she later described it. On June 17, 1928, their bright orange Fokker plane, nicknamed Friendship, took off from Newfoundland, Canada. 20 hours and 40 minutes later, they landed in Wales. Amelia became the first woman to cross the Atlantic by airplane, even though she hadn't touched the controls. The media went wild. Newspapers called Amelia Lady Lindy because of her resemblance to Charles Lindbergh. Both were tall, slim, and had tousled blonde hair. But Amelia was frustrated by the attention. She hadn't really flown the plane, and she felt she didn't deserve the credit. Stultz did all the flying, had to. I was just baggage, like a sack of potatoes, Amelia told reporters honestly. But the public didn't care about the details. They were fascinated by this brave, modest woman who had dared to fly across the dangerous Atlantic Ocean. The flight made Amelia instantly famous, but it also made her determined to prove that she was more than just a passenger. She began planning to fly across the Atlantic again, this time alone. For 4 years after her first Atlantic crossing, Amelia continued flying, setting records and proving her skills as a pilot. She won air races, performed at air shows, and wrote articles about aviation. But she was still haunted by the fact that she hadn't really earned her fame. On May 20th, 1932, exactly 5 years after Lindbergh's solo flight, Amelia decided it was time to prove herself. She took off from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, in her red Lockheed Vega, intending to fly to Paris just as Lindbergh had done. But the flight quickly became dangerous. Ice formed on her wings, making the plane difficult to control. Her altitude gauge stopped working, leaving her flying blind through thick clouds. Flames began shooting from a crack in the engine manifold, and fuel began leaking into the cockpit. After nearly 15 hours of fighting mechanical problems and terrible weather, Amelia realized she couldn't make it to Paris. She spotted a pasture in Northern Ireland and made an emergency landing, startling a farmer who was working in his field. "I've come from America," Amelia told the amazed farmer, as casually as if she had just walked over from the next village. Though she hadn't reached Paris, Amelia had accomplished something extraordinary. She became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, and only the second person ever to do so. The flight took 14 hours and 56 minutes, and it made Amelia the most famous woman in the world. Following her solo Atlantic flight, Amelia became America's sweetheart and the world's most famous female aviator. She used her fame to promote aviation and to encourage women to pursue their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. Amelia set numerous aviation records during these years. She became the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to California, a dangerous 2,400-mile journey over the Pacific Ocean. Many pilots had died attempting this flight, but Amelia navigated successfully through storms and mechanical problems to land safely in Oakland, California. She also became the first person to fly solo from Mexico City to New York, and she set speed records for flights across the United States. Each achievement proved that women could be just as skilled and brave as male pilots. But Amelia was more than just a pilot. She was a symbol of women's potential. She wrote books, gave lectures, and appeared in magazines, always encouraging women to break free from society's limitations. She famously said, "Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others." Amelia also worked to improve conditions for female pilots. She helped found the 99s, an organization for female aviators that still exists today. She lobbied airlines to hire female pilots and flight attendants, opening careers that had been closed to women. In 1931, Amelia married George Putnam, her publisher and manager. But she insisted on keeping her own name and continuing her aviation career, very unusual for married women in the 1930s. She called their marriage a partnership rather than a traditional husband-wife relationship. By 1937, Amelia had conquered almost every aviation challenge available to her. At age 39, she decided to attempt the ultimate flight, to become the first woman to fly around the world at the equator, the longest possible route around the globe. The flight would cover approximately 29,000 miles and take about 1 month, with stops for fuel and maintenance in dozens of countries. Amelia would fly a twin-engine Lockheed Electra, one of the most advanced aircraft of its time. Amelia chose navigator Fred Noonan to accompany her on this historic journey. Noonan was one of the world's best navigators, experienced in flying over the Pacific Ocean. Together, they spent months planning the route, studying weather patterns, and arranging fuel stops at remote airfields around the world. On June 1st, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off from Miami, Florida, beginning their journey eastward around the world. They flew across South America, Africa, and Asia, making scheduled stops and sending regular radio reports about their progress. Everything went smoothly for the first 22,000 miles. Amelia and Fred successfully navigated through thunderstorms over the Amazon jungle, sandstorms over Africa, and monsoons over India. They landed at dozens of remote airstrips, often greeted by crowds of local people who had never seen an airplane before. On July 2nd, 1937, they reached New Guinea, having completed about 3/4 of their journey. Only 7,000 miles remained, a flight across the Pacific Ocean to tiny Howland Island, then on to Hawaii, and finally back to California. At 10 a.m. on July 2nd, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off from New Guinea for what should have been one of the final legs of their round-the-world flight. Their destination was Howland Island, a tiny piece of land just 1.6 miles long and 0.5 miles wide, located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Finding Howland Island would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. The island was so small that if they were off course by just a few miles, they might fly right past it without seeing it. To help guide them in, the U.S. Coast Guard ship Itasca was stationed near Howland Island, ready to communicate with Amelia by radio. The flight began well. Amelia radioed that they were flying at 12,000 feet with clear weather. But as the hours passed, problems began to develop. Radio communications became increasingly difficult due to technical problems with their equipment. After flying for about 20 hours, Amelia and Fred should have been approaching Howland Island. The Itasca was listening carefully for Amelia's radio transmissions, ready to guide her to safety. At 7:42 a.m., the ship received Amelia's voice. "We are running north and south, but do not see the island. Cannot hear you. Gas is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio." At 8:43 a.m., they heard her final transmission. "We are running north and south. Gas is running low. We are unable to locate you." Then silence. When Amelia's radio went silent, the largest search and rescue operation in history began immediately. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard spent 16 days searching 250,000 square miles of Pacific Ocean, looking for any sign of Amelia, Fred, or their airplane. Ships, planes, and submarines combed the area around Howland Island and beyond. They found nothing, no wreckage, no oil slicks, no signs of life. It was as if Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had simply vanished into thin air. Theories about what happened began immediately and continue to this day. The official conclusion was that they ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean. The plane would have sunk quickly in the deep waters, leaving no trace. But other theories emerged. Some people believe they landed on a remote island and survived as castaways for days, weeks, or even years. Others think they were captured by Japanese forces who were secretly building military bases in the Pacific. Still others believe they successfully completed a secret spy mission for the U.S. government and were given new identities. Over the decades, many expeditions have searched for evidence of Amelia's fate. Researchers have found pieces of metal, bits of aircraft, and personal items on various Pacific islands. But none of this evidence has been conclusively proven to be from Amelia's plane. While the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance captures people's imagination, her real legacy lies in what she accomplished during her life, not in how it ended. Amelia shattered barriers for women in aviation and beyond. When she started flying, there were only a handful of female pilots in the entire world. By the time of her final flight, hundreds of women were learning to fly, inspired by her example. She proved that women could be just as brave, skilled, and determined as men. Her aviation record stood for years, and some were never broken. She showed that gender was no barrier to achievement in a field that had been completely dominated by men. Amelia also used her fame responsibly. She could have simply enjoyed being a celebrity, but instead she constantly promoted aviation safety, women's rights, and the importance of following your dreams no matter what obstacles you face. Her philosophy was simple but powerful. The most effective way to do it is to do it. She believed that the best way to prove you could accomplish something was simply to go out and do it, regardless of what others said was possible or appropriate. Amelia Earhart's final flight ended in mystery, but her legacy soars on forever. Every woman who becomes a pilot, astronaut, engineer, or CEO follows a path that Amelia helped create through her courage and determination. She taught us that limitations exist mainly in our minds, and that the phrase impossible for women really means not yet attempted by women. Her life proves that with enough determination, skill, and courage, anyone can reach for the sky and beyond. Today, when commercial airlines employ thousands of female pilots, when women command spacecraft, and when girls grow up knowing they can become anything they dream of becoming, we see Amelia Earhart's true legacy. She didn't just fly airplanes, she helped humanity soar to new heights of possibility. The mystery of what happened to Amelia over the Pacific may never be solved. But there's no mystery about her impact on the world. She showed us that the sky is not the limit. It's just the beginning. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring flight through Amelia Earhart's remarkable life. Remember, whatever dreams seem impossible today might just be waiting for someone brave enough to prove they're possible. Don't forget to subscribe to Lifelong Echoes for more inspiring stories that help you learn English while discovering the extraordinary lives of extraordinary people.